Hey, how you going? Jesus, some crazy stuff going on over in the States at the moment, isn't there? There's been lots of factories burned down, lots of chemical plants all over the world burning down. uh, so, this one, have a look at this one. Hazmat Studies, Livingston, LA, train derailment 36 years later. Robert Burke looks back at how one town managed a train derailment with hazardous materials and explosions. So an aerial view of the derailment site on the first day. September 28, 1982 began like no other in Livingston, LA. Shortly after 5 a.m., 36 cars on a 101 car in Illinois Central Gulf ICG train derailed in the center of the small community located 50 miles east of the state capital of Baton Rouge. History of derailments. Derailments were nothing new to the stretch of ICG railway tracks built in 1908 from Baton Rouge to Hammond. Previous derailments had occurred involving grain that was shipped from Illinois to Baton Rouge for river shipment to New Orleans and beyond. Near Holden, the first shipment of grain in the late 1960s saw the derailment of 9 grain cars. During the same trip, another derailment occurred in the Baton Rouge parish, where 14 cars left the track when it collapsed under the weight of the grain cars. That same year, 13 cars and chemical tankers derailed near Albany. In another incident, 7 cars derailed outside the corporate limits of Denham Springs, this time over a bridge over Grays Creek's collapse. Over the next several years, additional derailments occurred on the troubled stretch of track. 50 families in Corbin, a small community near Walker, were evacuated in 1970 after a tank of petroleum and other containing vinyl chloride derailed. A year later, 300 families were evacuated in the same community because of that derailment that occurred after the vandals broke a lock on a switch box and opened it, causing the train to go onto a spur line. A car of vinyl chloride left the tracks, ruptured and caught on fire. In the same year, another grain train derailed, causing 11 cars to leave the tracks near Emite. In 1978, 10 cars derailed when the tracks collapsed near Walker, and in 1980, more than 2,500 residents of Hammond, including Eastern Louisiana University students, were evacuated when a train derailed, spilling styrene monochemicals. The same year, a derailment resulted in a train coming to rest within 15 feet of an elementary school. Fortunately, it was on a Saturday, so school was not in session. The Livingston incident. In the 1982 derailment, 36 cars derailed near the fire department and high school, both located in the center of Livingston, population of around 1,000. Of the 36 derailed tank cars, 27 contained various regulated hazardous or toxic chemical commodities, 2 contained non-regulated hazardous materials, and 5 contained thermal petroleum products. A total of 20 tank cars were punctured or breached in the derailment. Chemicals released included glycol, hydrofluoric acid, which is fluoride, phosphorus, methyl chlorine, sodium metal tetraethyl lead, toluene, dithionate, petrochloroethylene, styrene, vinyl chloride, fuel lubel, and polyurethane. In addition to the spills, smoke and toxic materials were released in the air. Explosions and fires occurred almost immediately. Emergency responders did not need to be called. However, the Livingston volunteer firefighters could only watch from a safe distance, as there was nothing they could do at that point. Everyone in town heard the noise and saw the sky light up from the fires. Hannon Stewart, who owned Livingston Ambulance Company, lived about 150 yards from the railway. He thought it was the end of the world. His feeder ambulance was damaged beyond use. Had he been able to use one of them, Denny Road from his house was blocked by the derailment. Fortunately, there was no immediate need for ambulances. Resident in Denham Springs and Springfield heard the initial blast when the train derailed. Livingston Mayor Alan Hart and Fire Chief Darrell Jones decided everyone should withdraw to a safe distance. Police cars with loudspeakers went through the city, notifying residents to evacuate immediately. The people left so fast, many failed to take extra clothing, pets, food, medicine, and other personal property. The initial evacuation distance was 1 mile in all directions and was later extended. The evacuations went smoothly, with 3,000 plus people being evacuated in a 5-mile radius of the derailment, some for 2 weeks. Most evacuations were completed in 2 hours. Those who did not have any place to go were housed in Walker High School gym. Experts arrived quickly, and Chief Jones reported Chemtrek, a public service hotline for emergency responders needing a hazmat response coordination, was very helpful at the beginning of the incident. Fires were mostly allowed to burn rather than be extinguished, but firefighters stood by, ready to fight the fire if they needed, and if they responded to structure fires caused by the explosions during the derailment. The Railroad EPA Region 6 on-scene coordinator was Frank Gordy. The Coast Guard Gulf Strike Team responded as well. The Louisiana State University sent a foam truck with a monitor to fight flammable liquids. In Louisiana, the state police provide responsible stabilization for hazmat incidents. The police sent the state hazardous waste team, which brought equipment and supplies, and explosive experts from the state police were also dispatched. A state police helicopter was dispatched for aerial surveillance of the scene. Video and still photos were returned to the command posts and studied for information on the tanks and the status of the fire. Making progress. By nightfall of the first day, environmental officials knew 3/4 of the overturned tank cars contained toxic chemicals. Managers from companies responsible for the chemicals, hazardous waste response personnel, and railroad officials had met to discuss the action plan. The original command post was determined to be too close and was moved 2 miles away near Interstate 12. A forward command post was retained where decontamination took place. All water from decontamination was collected and properly disposed of as hazardous waste. 24-hour air monitoring was conducted by the Louisiana State Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ. They also tested soil and groundwater for contamination. By day 3, initial fires had subsided to small, lazy fires, and the identification of the locations of the tank cars began, along with the damage assessment by engineers. The sodium metal car was found to be intact. The railway began to clean up with vacuum trucks for chemicals that had spilled. They were hauled to a hazardous material waste site. All personnel conducting the cleanup operations wore appropriate chemical protective clothing. On day 4, there were not many tasks to be accomplished by the derailment site, so personnel addressed other needs such as feeding pets and livestock that were not evacuated and contamination tests on water and vegetation. Contaminated water was being hauled into a disposal company, and police officers continued their security patrols. Plans were made to start extinguishing small fires in and around the derailment tank cars. At approximately 3:15, a spectacular explosion occurs, causing a massive fireball of 400 feet in height and a mushroom cloud visible 15 miles away. A tank car of tetraethyl lead had been weakened by the flame impingement, causing a boiler-type explosion. The main part of the tank rocketed 600 feet. It caused damage half a mile away. The tank car struck a mobile home, causing it to catch fire. It burned to the ground before firefighters could extinguish the fire. ICG sent a response team following the explosion. By day 7, the fires once again began to subside, and the progress of clearing debris and contamination resumed. During the cleaning process, a tank car styrene ignited and burned. Chemtrek provided a conference call between the officials in Livingston and 3 top manufacturers of the product in the United States. Now that all remained were the 6 tank cars of vinyl chloride. The experts determined that it was too dangerous to try and move or offload the derailed tanks. They decided to blow them up and burn off the product, a process known as vent and burn. A pit was dug around the cars to contain the vinyl chloride spilling from the breached tank and allowed the vinyl chloride to burn. It took 12 hours to burn the contents of the 6 cars. During the 6th day of the incident, the controlled explosions were set off at 5:30 p.m. Fires burned through the night, making it easier for railway workers to remove cars. State Health Department personnel used data from monitoring and testing to make the decision to allow residents to return. Finally, residents were allowed to return to their homes, offices and businesses to begin to decontaminate. Assessing the damage, Stewart lost his home and other buildings on the property. His home was torn down after the railway purchased the property. He did not replace his ambulance and retired. 19 homes and other buildings in Livingston were destroyed and severely damaged. Railway lines and the adjacent highway were closed for an extended period of time. Damage to the derailment cost in excess of $14 million. And that's in 1983. That's a lot of money. Environmental cleanup took several months. Over 200,000 gallons of toxic chemical products were spilled and absorbed into the soil, requiring extensive remediation that involved removing soil 50 feet deep and replacing it with uncontaminated soil. The contaminated soil had to be transported to a remote dump site miles away. Because residents' exposure to toxic chemicals prior to and during the evacuation, a clinic was established by the railway in Livingston to test the victims for the next 30 years. Monitoring wells were installed to check for subsurface contamination and remained in place until 2016. Investigation and the changes. The National Transport Safety Board conducted an investigation and issued a report in 1983. It determined several factors that contribute to the derailment. Disengagement of worn air hose coupling as the train passed over a lower track joint, which initiated the automatic emergency application of the train brakes. An excessive buff force within the train resulted in the failure of the person at the locomotion controls to respond to the brake application. Placement of empty cars near the front of the train between heavily loaded cars. Impairment of the engineer's facilities by alcohol and abandonment of locomotion control to an unauthorized and unqualified person. Apparently there was a woman in there with him. Failure to the ICG to supervise train operations and personnel adequately, and lack of inspection and maintenance of the Hammond District main track. Environmental impact was by lack of shelf couplers on some tank cars and inadequate protection of bottom outlets on the bottom of some cars. During my visit to Livingston, I learned that local officials that the train engineer had permitted a female friend to ride on the train and place the unqualified person at the train's controls. It was also reported that both may have been under the influence of drugs and alcohol at the time. Following the Livingston derailment, railway officials elected to install heavier rails and reconstructed the roadbed, hoping it would stop future derailments. In 1982, the Livingston derailment was considered the granddaddy of all train wrecks. Since then, there have been no reported derailments along the 50-mile stretch from Hammond to Baton Rouge. Constant inspection and prompt maintenance seems to put an end to the issue. The trains still carry hazardous materials, but it seems to be travel at safer speeds. Livingston incident was the worst in Louisiana history, but it was also the best handled, as there was no serious injuries or death in immediate response. During the clean-up, a railway worker lost both legs when a cable broke during cleaning operations. Additionally, the first 3 state troopers to arrive on the site have since died from cancer. It is unknown how many others have died from cancer caused by the exposure to toxic materials during the incident. Livingston today. Livingston still has a volunteer firefighter department with unpaid driver during the day and all volunteer at night. Engine 1 is the only remaining apparatus from the 1982 derailment. The city has rebuilt many areas damaged by the derailment, but the area in front of the fire station on Highway 190 is now a park. Only a concrete slabs remains from a dentist's office that was destroyed in the derailment. Hazmat response is still handled by the Louisiana State Police. The railway line is now owned by Canadian National Railway. Hazardous materials are still shipped regularly through Livingston. So they got for additional information, contact the Livingston Fire Department Chief Kirk B. Duffy and Livingston May David McCreary. I was also looking at contamination of how the soil in America and how bad some of these places are from after the war and before the war. And it's pretty bad. So there are some rumors going around as to what happened into the accident. I'll leave these links in the description for you. About 5:12 a.m. September 28, Illinois Central Gulf Railway freight train extra derailed 43 cars and single main track at the Hammond District in Livingston, Louisiana. Of the derailed cars, 36 were tank cars. 27 of these cars contain hazardous waste and materials. So that was in all that what I've just read. Derailment, joint bar, hazardous materials, human factors, alcohol, tank car, bottom outlet, way bills, emergency procedures, training emergency. So that was just all in that, what I read out. According to the operator clerk, she was still operating the locomotive when the train reached Livingston, 9.6 miles east of the Lockhart detector. The locomotive was running in full throttle, and according to the operator clerk, the needle of the speed indicator was bumping 40. Jeez. 3 or 4 seconds after passing over the crossing over lane leading to Livingston Parish School Board building, she felt the locomotive momentarily rock and dip. The operator clerk described the event as a bottoming out. She glanced over to the other side of the cab and saw the engineer and head brakeman reclining in their seats in a relaxed position. There was no reaction from the engineer, and nothing was said, so the clerk did not change any of the control settings. As the locomotive approached a private crossing located about 1,200 feet east of the school board crossing, again it bottom out. According to the operator clerk, the train went into emergency braking 2 to 3 seconds later, as evidenced by the power control switch indicator light on the control stand becoming lidded and the sound of air escaping from the brake stand. She reacted first by placing the automatic brake handle in the emergency position, and then by placing the throttle in the idle position. According to the operator clerk, within a minute after the emergency brake application, the engineer came over to the controls, placed his hand on hers as she moved the throttle handle. She then pulled the independent brake handle around to the application position, after which the engineer took hold of it. The operator clerk stated that she didn't know what the engineer did with the independent brake handle, although she remained in the operator's seat throughout the stopping sequence for some time afterwards. Wow. So here's a map of the town. Derailment to Baton Rouge, and it all happened in here. In October 1, 82 hours following the derailment, involved the 29th car, which was loaded with vinyl chloride, and it had a thermically induced explosion. Propelled 225 feet south and struck an unoccupied quadplex dwelling. Most of the top portion of the tank rocketed approximately 425 feet through Pine Grove. Large sections of steel outer insulating jacket came to rest both sides of the Highway 190. Airborne fragments are believed to have set fire to a 55-foot mobile home and adjoining outbuilding about 500 feet south of the derailment site. Other parts travelled as far as 1,500 feet south. Wow. So these two men were drinking all night at the motel and had to go to work at 3:30 a.m. and they were never subjected to a breathalyzer test or a toxicological exam. Don't know if it's true now, but back then, according to the Chemical Manufacturers Association, a party to the Safety Board's investigation of this accident, there's no legal responsibility on the part of the chemical companies to respond to an emergency, even if a commodity they manufactured and loaded in a car is involved. The transport carrier assumes the full responsibility for safety in transporting the commodity. Nevertheless, the chemical companies have responded in the past hazardous material emergencies because they alone have in-depth knowledge of the commodities. Jeez, 14 to 16 ounces of 86 proof bourbon liquor during the 5.5 hours preceding the accident. Oh, whoa. They estimated he was 0.19. Whoa. So this is some footage of it when it happened, and it's eerily similar to what's currently going on. There is just so many rollovers, happening at the moment. What's going on is it because of cost cutting? Apparently there's 1,000 a year that happens now. How can it be happening with the technology that we have? It shouldn't be happening. And you got to think about all these chemicals burning off that will cause acid rain. Acid rain just burns anything it touches. It kills the trees, it kills the vegetation. The air is toxic. You need a military mask or a proper respirator with a breather. It's toxic shit. And these first responders got cancer and died in the first place. So it's really sad that these cops died. So it's just, where's the EPA now? It's like a distraction, Something's going on behind the scenes that they don't want us to know. Dutch made a good point that the North American craton is moving. Is it from the earthquakes happening? Is this why there's so many? Or is there a more sinister reason that it's happening because of an agenda where, you can't live on the land because it's so polluted and so toxic that you've got to be moved into a smart city. They got these armbands that they wanted people to wear before this incident happened too, and also there was that train movie that was made. It's just too many coincidences. I'll leave the link in the description for that one. One theory. First, who are the Amish? The Amish are an Anabaptist Christian religious community in America who try varying degrees to shun and use modern technology. Some Amish communities use technology in business, but most agree that it disrupts their traditional way of life. The lifestyle of working in local agricultural communities has made them immune to various forms of government coercion and control. Since the Obama administration, the Amish community have been harassed over trivial matters like selling raw milk to willing and informed customers. Many of us on Twitter recognize the Biden administration is simply a puppet government to the corporate interests who line his pockets. Obama said he would take a third term through a puppet president himself. So with a proven track record and animosity against the Amish during the Obama years, we have precedent for coordinated state action against the Amish. The cast of suspicion on why a chemical accident took place near the border of Pennsylvania, Ohio, in the heart of the Amish country. In the 2022 Netflix released film called White Noise, the film depicts the aftermath of a train derailment and deadly hazardous chemical leak in Ohio. The film premiered in the Van Festival on August 30, 2022. Coincidence or predictive program? And the family that was in there also come from East Palestine. Another reason the Biden admin might have an interest in sabotaging the Amish community is because of their vaccine hesitancy and their ability to resist federal mandates and relying on localism. The Amish were the first to achieve herd and dispose, Gotta be careful there saying that crap. Sadly, you gotta censor yourself, really. The Amish community was, though relatively small, had the ability to grow and distribute large volumes of agricultural products. Their autonomous religious communities are likely perceived as an obstacle to federal control of American society during declared state of emergency. They have a population of 373,620. If corrupt elements in the government are preparing to release another instigate further, and then the Amish are enemy number one. Poisoning the water and the land where they are most populous is a way to quietly harm them under the guise of an accident. It says Ohio train development controlled burn of toxic chemicals went as planned, PA government says. When vinyl chloride is burned, it converts into hydrochloric acid and binds to the water particles in the atmosphere. From here, it will rain on the farmlands of Ohio and Pennsylvania in a region where there are high concentrations of the Amish communities. Governors DeWine and Shapiro of Ohio and Pennsylvania endorsed the controlled burn of these toxic chemicals by the Norfolk Southern Rail. This may be a criminal act of the chemical warfare in violation of the Geneva Protocol. A legal fund could reasonably be established to prosecute these responsible. The Environmental Protection Agency says it's monitoring two other chemicals, phosphine, which is what they used in World War I, and hydrogen chloride, that may be released into the air by the controlled burn. Neither of these were good news either. Phosphine was used as a weapon in World War I, highly toxic gas that can lead to choking, chest constriction, and the most acute exposures, even possibly death. Hydrogen chloride, which has a pungent odor, can irritate the throat, nose, and skin. News articles vary, with some claiming that the fire was an accident or was a controlled release due to fears that the chemicals might explode. One obvious question is that the chemicals were prone to explosion. Why didn't they explode when they were deliberately set on fire? In recent news, union workers in the rail industry have been sounding the alarm on lowered safety standards. While this is important, it doesn't account for why these chemicals were disposed of in the most destructive and reckless manner possible via rush control burn. See, that one I just read out took 14 days of slow burn and cleaning up. The proper way to deal with a spill of toxic chemical waste like this would B, to have specialised workers contain and remove the hazardous elements to secure a government facility until a safe process for disposal can be determined. That did not happen. Further legal inquiry into the exact details of how the governors DeWine and Chapeau managed to direct resources during this disaster may be revealing. The arrest of the journalist at the site is extremely suspicious given the circumstances. Adding to these suspicions, the residents in the area were told to leave during the controlled burning of the hazardous waste. Justification was that it's a safety process, but it could have been means to prevent documentation of the events in the area. In closing, there are many instances of toxic chemical spills throughout the history of the industrial civilization. Nature is resilient and usually recovers. With that in mind, we need to demand accountability for the disaster so that preventable issues like this don't happen again. It's just all over the world at the moment. This is in Verona, Italy. More toxic chemicals are released into the environment. It's the 10th place in 1 week that we know of that is having extremely toxic chemicals explode and being released into the environment. You know, it's like all the processing plants that were burnt down. The chemical leaks, exposures and fires which have occurred in just the last month. And as Dutch said, it seems to be along the North American craton. That's like the North American craton goes up like that. Strange how all the profiles were changed just before this happened too. Like EPA changed the regulations. Huh. The region also has Bill Gates purchased land heavy cluster. Also, the amount of Freemasons that are in that area is unreal. After 17 years of inactivity and just a couple of weeks before the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, the CDC decides to update its toxicological profile. On the vinyl chloride, the update changes the lethal exposure from 100 parts per million to 100 million parts thousand to 100,000 parts per million. What are the odds? That was in January. That's a screenshot of February. East Palestine Fire Department offering new My ID service. January 26, 2023. East Palestine, the Village Fire Department is hosting a sign-up event for a new My ID service. The My ID is being made available to both East Palestine and Unity Township residents. The sign-up event is scheduled for Sunday from noon to 7 p.m. in the East Palestine Community Centre located in the public park. Village Councilman ID program that helps first responders aid victims more effectively and efficiently. So it's like a ID thing, you know, you attach to your watch or it's an armband. Biden admin turns down Ohio's request for disaster assistance after toxic derailment. FEMA continues to tell Governor DeWine in Ohio it's not eligible for assistance. Biden administration turned down a request for federal disaster assistance from Ohio Mike DeWine in the aftermath of the train derailment. It's unreal. Just want to add, look at all the land gates, land holdings, all the farmland that he's been buying up, and of course overlay that map to the underground water basins, and you see what's going on. Easy. Food processing plant fires, factory fires, 2020 to 22. Norwood, Massachusetts, fire investigations. There are just so many here on these food factories, and there was another one recently at a egg farm. And you look at the years prior to this, there was nothing like this. Like, yeah, there were fires, but nothing to the current level we see at the moment that's going on. It's not just US, it's all over the world, you know. There's another refinery fire in Italy, as well as Russia had a chemical factory go up in smoke too. So, and that's just recent. There's just way too many of them. Something's off. St. Vincent destroyed by fire. It's, you know, people just It's unreal. Kellogg, Riceland Foods. I'll leave the links in the description. JBS. It's unreal. And like looking at Wikipedia, it's like prior to 2020, 21, nowhere near as many factory fires. This one apparently hasn't been in the media either. It's huge. This is the one in Italy. You know, what's going on? Is something going to happen soon and they're preparing and they're just burning everything so no one else can have it? Like, something's going on. Come on. It can't just be happening for no reason. Even the water's catching on fire. Like, do you live in these areas? Have you tried this with your water? I'd be getting out if I can. I know a lot of people can't. And then in Ontario, Canada, it's got, like, you can see the chemicals in the snow. It's like rainbow colours. Isn't the WHO and the CDC involved in this as well? This is a health problem. And let's not forget China. We'll add China to that one as well. They're having factory fires as well. What's going on in the world? Chicago Heights, morning fire at a manufacturing facility at 11th Washington, orchestrated attacks. This is just unreal. You know, like last 2 years it's been food production, and now it looks like they're going to like your production of oils and synthetic chemicals. It's what it looks like. This one's located in Vienna, Italy. 10th place. This is the 10th fire in 1 week. That's extremely toxic chemicals to explode and be released into the environment. Where's all the greenies? Like, where's Greta at the moment, you know? Why isn't someone carrying on about like the environment? Like, surely this is going to put every country that has these fires, put their emissions out. Chemical leaks, explosions and fires which occurred in just the last month. And there's more than that. So, anyway, check out my Twitter. Thanks for watching. If you're still here, I appreciate it. Like, share, or not. It's irrelevant. Just get the message out. Thanks, bye.